This is the Secure CyberConnect podcast with Jay Adamson and Warren Atkinson, where we're joined by information, cybersecurity, technology and talent acquisition professionals who share their journeys, unique perspectives and offer advice and guidance. Our topics on this episode will be the truth about cyber go-to-market, why most strategies fail and what winning looks like. Today we're delighted to be joined by David Brown. David is a seasoned and enthusiastic sales and business leader with over 20 years of international sales management experience within cybersecurity, enterprise software, and business-to-business software as a service domains. As the CEO of CounterCraft, a leading provider of cyber detection and threat intelligence solutions, he's responsible for driving the company's growth, innovation, and vision across global markets. With a proven track record of taking companies through rapid scales, through to IPOs and trade sales, he leverages his industry expertise, strategic insights, and business acumen to create and execute effective sales strategies, as well as fostering long-term client relationships and building high-performing teams across his vast expertise within global sales strategies and operations. David, welcome to the Secure CyberConnect podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Jay, Warren, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. That's the most polished CV for me I've ever heard. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. So we kick things off with our icebreakers, really. First things first, if you could give us a very brief high-level overview of some of the key themes we'll be discussing.
Well, I think some of the things we'll go through. We'll talk about what changed, because I think we all noticed, we've talked about this in setting up our conversation today. You know, life was going on. We had COVID. That was interesting. And then really 23, 24, well, the world changed, didn't it? It certainly changed in cyber. I won't say what was easy, but pretty much everything that we'd grown accustomed to. If I wanted to see sales growth, I just added some more people and things like that. All just changed. And I dare say, here we are in 2025 and the last 100 days when we're recording this, our man, Mr. Trump, I think the world has changed again. So I think, that there's some of the themes that we started picking up and playing with in 23 and 24. That's going to accelerate. So we'll talk about that and what that means to playbooks and stuff. You very kindly asked about what makes a personality, maybe as in public, to be the public-facing front of a cyber company. So I guess we'll talk about that. I think I was quite humbled last night. I got to meet George from CrowdStrike, and so there's a man who's definitely operating in the public arena, isn't he? And I think we'll probably finish up a little bit about me. And that's probably the bit I'm a bit nervous about, because being English, none of us like that. But yeah, I think it should be an interesting conversation, or at least I hope it will be an interesting conversation.
So could you maybe share something that you're proud of or excited about that isn't featured on your LinkedIn profile, for example?
That isn't featured in my LinkedIn profile? Oh, loads of stuff. So, the LinkedIn bit is always about what a company's doing, and there's some nice bits there. What's not on, I think we'll talk about maybe a bit later on. My wife and I adopted 2 young boys. We've had them now for 2 years. Been a bit of a journey. Being honest, it has been a bit of a journey for us. Egotistically, I think you'd like to think, well, they're changing lives. I think that's a great thing to do. But yeah, I think more than that, it's about love, really, isn't it? And we'll talk about that. And I really would encourage people, if you are in that place, to go take a look at it. I think not enough people take a look at that, and maybe they should.
Yeah, well, we'll sort of look forward to talking through that in more detail a bit later on. And we always sort of typically like to find out maybe if there was a moment or indeed a significant challenge that you faced in your career that maybe shaped your views on cyber.
Shape my views on cyber. Ooh, interesting one. I suppose I'd go back. What got me into cyber was a company called Industrial Defender. And so Industrial Defender is still here. And we have to wind all the way back to that time just in front of the London Olympics. So before that, done all sorts of things, including designing. At one stage, I used to design the control systems for oil refineries. And as my kids would say, that's when the world was in black and white. But I used to do all of that stuff. And there came an opportunity, well, David, you know all about this control system stuff, things that control plants, oil refineries and national grids. And I thought, well, yeah, not a lot about national grids really, but okay, yes, yeah, I know how to do. And then I ended up, I got the opportunity to run a mayor for Industrial Defender. And all of a sudden there was, well, UK National Grid, we need to keep bad people out. And 20 years ago, all of this was in its infancy. So that was a really interesting program. And then, well, there was the London Olympics. And if we all go back, it was James Bond and our Queen jumping out the helicopter. And you go start talking to people. And first of all, you're talking about, because it's all really intellectual stuff about how do you keep bad people out and what's good segmentation and what is all these. And then it was, well, yeah, so what's the problem we're trying to fix here? What is it? And I said, well, David, imagine how bad it would be if when we're doing that, the opening ceremony, the whole world looking at us, if the lights, as James Bond and the Queen jumping out the helicopter, because we all thought they did it for real, but no. What would happen if you turned the lights out, locked the gates, and played the sound of machine gun fire? Right? What would happen? How catastrophic that would be in terms of, well, being blunt, loss of human life, right? It would have been, they're bound to have been loss of life. If it wasn't loss of life, it would have been those people injured. And if you're feeling nationalistic, well, shame, really, shame for us as a nation about that taking place, that taking place in our watch. And that sort of suddenly brought it from the deeply technical to, actually, there's an impact here. There's a real impact. It's not like we've had recently, was it the Bybit thing? I've nicked a few billion crypto coins and we say, well, okay, well, how does that impact me? It's not like any one of these financial crimes and you think, oh, gosh, well, it does impact people. It does impact banks, but loss of human life. Well, actually, that's quite serious stakes, really, isn't it? And that's probably for me, there was the aha period from going from, well, this is intellectually stimulating to, oh, actually, yeah, there's consequences.
The gravitas that comes with it, absolutely, yeah, for sure. And just leading on from that, another question we like to try and probe with our guests is maybe if there was a mistake that you made in your career, and that doesn't necessarily have to be cyber related, of course, but well, exactly. We always say the same. If we could just find one that stands out, we've all made a lot, I'm sure. But what lesson did you learn from that?
Well, to start with, Jay, there's been so many, right? I mean, here I am, I've got grey hair and scars and all the rest of it. So there've been so many mistakes. And I think that what did I learn through all of that? Resilience, really. I mean, if you want to go for the whole, what do you learn? It's resilience. So, I don't know about you. I'll make a mistake and then typically I go berate myself in public about how stupid that was. And also in private, I'll berate myself in private about that. And the bit that I learned was to let it go. And actually, that's not easy. Well, it's not easy for my personality to let it go. Because if you don't let it go, it festers. When it festers, it creates bad habits. When it creates bad habits, it gives you ill health. And I'll talk to you as a man that would actually, all of that stuff put me in hospital when I was 25. So, I thought I was master of the universe. I worked for a company called UOP and I spent my life on a plane running around to people as part of a big team saying, you want to buy a refinery? We sold the kit of plans to make oil refineries is what we did. My bit was control systems and safety stuff, things that stop oil refineries going bang. Because, let's imagine you've got hydrocarbon gas, platinum catalyst. It's in a bubble of hydrogen at a few hundred degrees C while you regenerate the catalyst. And if it did go boom, had the potential for massive catastrophic kind of explosion. So it goes back to sense of responsibility, right? I thought I was indispensable. I was doing all these things. I was working stupid hours. And then they thought I had cancer, and they thought I had lymphoma, and I had a surgeon saying, I want you on the table within 36 hours. And I had these are all the things that will happen to you after that. And none of it was good. I mean, there was no good things coming out of that. Well, fast forward, I wake up and look at the surgeon and so like, so, what? And he said, well, now we're going to have a conversation. Good news, bad news. Good news, not cancer. Sort of the next bit, sort of bad news, really, David. We've now tested you for everything, so like AIDS through to hepatitis through to everything else. You've got cat scratch fever. And so, well, what's that? You have a cat. What's that? Said, well, that blinds infants because their immune system is not developed, and you're a fully grown man, and that thing that was the size of a tennis ball in your armpit, you don't have lymph glands anymore. I removed everything. I sucked all that out. It was petrifying. And so, here's the conversation, David. Whatever you have been doing, stop it. Stop it now. And that was fairly bleak. Well, it was both pleasurable because, hey, I don't have cancer. I'm going to be fine. But that probably was my ultimate wake-up call around when you all get really stressy and everything else. Yeah, actually, all of this stuff has an impact. Now I've got a lingering thing, so I've got a massively defective immune system. I just don't have any lymph glands around here at all. So I catch colds. I get the sniffles a lot and things like that. And for me, it's the constant reminder of let it go.
No, we appreciate you sharing that, David, with us. Thank you. Look, getting into some of the topics that we've touched on already, one of the key things we want to try and understand is the cyber sector in what I guess feels like back end of 22, certainly 2023, 24, and of course beyond. There was a seemingly endless boom from 10 years between 2012 through to 22. To what is now a very clear belt tightening. And the cyber sector has obviously seen some major shifts in terms of both growth and investment over the last 24 months. So what actually happened and what do we think's next? In your view, what do you think were the biggest shocks to the sector and to make this occur?
I think, yeah, and it was a great time to take over as CEO of a cybersecurity company, really, wasn't it? I think what drove it really was market change. So what we saw had been the result of effectively a zero interest rate on money. We talk about zero interest rate stuff. So if you had it, if you were an investor, what they call an LP in a fund, or you're a large financial institution, well, you're not going to make a lot of return on just putting your money in the bank. And we all look back and we benefited off of really cheap mortgage rates and stuff like that. And so a couple of things happened. First of all, that attractiveness versus risk, it kind of changed. We'd generated companies and we'd generated businesses which never really were a profitable enterprise. They just ran based on what's going to be the next infusion of cash to pay for payroll, to pay for whatever, to go by some market size. And we were on that. And at the end of it, everybody talked about unicorns, and well, unicorn, you get your 100 million revenue, you get your $1 billion valuation, you do the IPO and everybody's rich, and it all covers all of the losses that were made along the way. And the roundabout kind of stopped, really, didn't it? We had this whammy of, well, my mortgage suddenly went up. Okay, but don't worry. And then, well, the money to fuel the constant hiring and things dried up. So the money was still there. They were called dry powder. There's still calls and commits on it, and the market's changing a bit now, but it didn't get spent. People started to miss plans. started to have to do the the belt tightening in the organizations. And what we all missed was that had a real impact. So you look at banks, we'd have said, well, banks always buy, banks are always at the leading edge of. But what we didn't think about is, well, banks have tough times too. And think about the bank. So again, this is a really simplistic way of looking at it, but you look at the bank and suddenly they've got defaults on credit cards, they've got defaults on car loans, they've got defaults on all those things. That hits their profitability, it hits their spend. When it comes down to IT and security, well, in the city, right, in the city of London, let's keep it nice and local. We used to have this great feeling that when we go talk to your person, my guy, my girl, my lady, whoever, they had a lot easier access to budget to spend. And there was, in many cases, people I know would be, well, if I don't get to do what I want to do, it's Wednesday, I'll take a couple of days off, play golf, and I'll start somewhere else on Monday. And that stopped. And what happens when that stops, you've got this whole sort of daisy chain domino effect of stuff going on. So if you're in the company, well, actually, I haven't got access to that cheap money to hire more people or cover my losses. Got to do something about that. That typically involves people. When you're talking to your customers, well, their organizations looking, oh gosh, actually got to do a bit of belt tightening here because our profitability is not looking so good. That cascades down to departments. When it cascades down to departments, well, actually I've got less money to spend, and actually I don't have as many options of going somewhere else. And the other natural tendency that added was, where you used to have a really quick decision in procuring a new technology or whatever, then you got the insecurity thing. And you can understand the human nature bit was, well, actually now I need to spread that decision around more people. If you look at the procurement process, what changed? It used to be, well, there's my person. Well, CISOs can't buy anything really. Reality is they've got a budget of 50 grand if they're lucky on a discretionary. The rest of it has to go to a board for approval, and they're all saying, "Oh, should we do this?" If you're looking at one or two below the CISO, they're saying, "Oh, actually, is this career limiting for me to propose this solution or support this solution if it doesn't work?" Because there's less of an atmosphere now that would support failed projects. We all know loads of failed projects as you go around. What happened? Decision-making community grew by 30%, at least 30%. I think it's probably grown a little bit more now. So you need to have a really good return on investment message. It is return on investment. It's not about keep the lights on and all the rest of it. It's what will this make or save? And a lot of people weren't ready for that. So you've got this sort of perfect storm of stuff, which ultimately meant the playbook that you were using in 2020, 2021, whatever, and life was good and everybody was at 100 and something percent of quota, didn't work anymore. And people were slow to adapt. That was a really long-winded answer, wasn't it?
And how did CounterCraft adapt? What did you learn as a leader in this time?
Gosh, I learned that we had a business that we had to rapidly change. And I think there's a couple of things that, being blunt, so our cost structure, we couldn't sustain the cost structure that we'd built. And the business premise needed to be changed as well, because that didn't fit the needs of the market. And it's easy for me to say that because I've done this for a number of years. And when I've worked in this kind of situation, so called in by the VCs to take a look at this, it's easy to come in with grey hairs and scars and experience all those failure things that we talked about before. But typically founders, they've not been through one of these cycles. They've not got the experience about how do you take stuff to market. And I think a part of this is intellectual curiosity and maths about how do you change the proposition and you start measuring impact. So while I'm talking about our customers, have to look at very carefully at return on investment. Well, actually, we have to look really carefully at returns on investment. And I'll talk about maths, right? I love maths. And ultimately, it's about numbers and it's about detail. It seems really strange for a salesperson to be talking about maths, numbers, and detail, right? That's probably the geeky engineer in me from the earlier on in the career, but the world revolves around that. And I will pull it back to actually good salespeople. They know their numbers. They know how many people they've got to call to get how many meetings to take to the next stage. So they work through their numbers too, and they adjust those. And they will measure the effectiveness of the initial pitch and how they convert and all of those things. Good people do that. And I don't want to be disparaging about our colleagues in the marketplace, but in 2020, you didn't really need to do that. You got the right logo on the side of what it was you were selling. You can say if I was selling Cisco or selling whatever, you kind of that gave you an easier ride, and you didn't need to do that. And it was a bit of a shock, I think, when the last 2 years suddenly turned up.
I appreciate you sharing. And is someone that's been a high performance individual throughout their career and seen a lot of success, briefly, how would you best define high performance?
High performance is continuous. Well, people are going to talk about ability to hit quota, but for me, actually, it's about continuous curiosity. It's about the experimentation. It's about measuring the results of. It is somebody who is continuously looking for that edge. So, I mean, sports, right? I love motor racing. And motor racing, my wife tried, how can you get excited about somebody who's a tenth of a second a lap faster than somebody else? It's hard to visualize. What's a tenth mean? What's a thousandth mean? Well, actually, when you measure it of two cars overlaid going around a circuit, a tenth, that's 2 or 3 car lengths ahead by the time that they come over the start line to finish line. That's a couple of car lengths. Actually, when you visualize it in terms of distance, you can appreciate that means a lot faster. It's more speed. When you look at a stopwatch, what's a tenth? Can you divide it? Can you measure a tenth on your watch? So and that whole business is around how do you shave fractions off? How do you get a bit of a weight saving here? How do you get a little minor advantage on this corner? How can you improve braking? So it's about technique, isn't it? It's technique and it's about tools.
It's about refining, of course, and those compounding wins. So appreciate you sharing. And you mentioned earlier before the call, the traditional mold of enterprise sales is no longer existent. It's certainly something that we feel the sales playbook is dead. So could you share with us from your perspective what's changed for sales?
Well, I think I mentioned earlier on, it's kind of the number of people that you need to talk to. It's about hyper personalizing your messaging. So you go back to high performance. One of the things that I'm proud of, I've got some individuals that I've coached them to multiple $1 million plus commission years, right? Nothing gives me greater pleasure than to see somebody else win, get to take the money home, do something tremendous for them, for their family, because that's why we all do it, right? So they're able to do something for their family, whether it's buying their home outright, whether it's whatever it is that there's desire. So that's a brilliant thing. It's also not quite so cool when people, for whatever reason, can't and don't and won't. But what changed was that kind of playbook of ta-da, I'm here and I'm selling you a thing, and this thing's got many features, and it comes from insert the name of the famous brand on the side here, and of course you'll want to nod your head, oh, that looks cool, we'll try it out because we're interested in that feature, that thing, that's the latest, newest thing. And you go say, so Warren, what's it going to take to buy this? Well, I've got I need a quote, and I go run this through procurement. I want to see my traditional discount, and life's good, right? That's great. Let's have a cup of coffee and done. And I think we also didn't shake off the COVID influence of, well, maybe I don't see you in person as much as I used to do. And now we've got this cadence of 1 hour weekly calls and stuff. And well, it changed. I mentioned it, the decision community now is 30% bigger. I mentioned that it's about return on investment for that organization. It's more than ever about mitigating risk for that individual. It's about hyper personalizing as a hyper personalization for every person that you identify in that chain now. So, what's in it for the person who signs off? What's in it for the person who's going to take it to the board? What's in it for those people below the person who signs off on it? And they might all be different thing. And I'll let you into a secret. None of those is about features. None of those are about features at all, unless that feature drives something. And then the other bit that's changed is asynchronous communication. So you'd be saying, what the hell's that? Well, as soon as you start dropping yourself into this cadence of, well, let's have another call next week, let's have another call next week, because we can't go meet in the office for whatever reason, because nobody wants to do that these days. In the old days, you'd say, well, Jay, can you go nip down the corridor and talk to the guy in procurement? Can you walk next door and go ask Warren about this? And no, you don't. Warren might have this question. So do I have to wait until next week to address that question? Because I've got to clear that for everybody. And so, how do you do that? That's different now. And again, it could be, if we're talking about Warren, say, what's Warren's preferred method of communicating and making him feel comfortable, because he's in that hierarchy of people who are going to make it. So is it emails and it spins 300 and something revs per minute to anti-clockwise? Does that address your question? Or we do this or that and the flux capacitor does? Or would you prefer I send you a video which explains it, and maybe that video is in Arabic, because now we're introducing the tyranny of language into here and communicating in your preferred way? Why would I do that? Because if I don't, somebody else will now, and that might get you ahead on the piece which is not the functionality but is trust and relationship. You've taken enough trouble to understand how I want to be communicated to, and are doing that. And 3 years ago, we didn't have the tools and we didn't have the competition for those deals that we have today.
We've seen a lot of that when we've supported VCs or even vendors that are trying to break into regions. A lot of them come into the European market space, for instance, with a lack of cultural understanding of their geographical regions. And that's certainly something that sets the weak from the obsolete. Those that succeed have taken time to understand what needs to be put in place and how to interact with businesses in those regions. And I know you've touched on a few key strategies that help organizations sort of advance in this remit, but what other key strategies should modern business-to-business cybersecurity organizations be looking at and embracing right now?
I think we kind of touched on a whole bunch of these. I think you have to definitely start with, what's the business case? What's the pain you're trying to solve? So I remember a painful period here. My first question so what's the pain that we're trying to solve? And it's like, it's this new technology. They're looking at what's the pain? Because if you don't have a pain point to hold on to, then you can't get into the meat of why would somebody do this. So I think there's an awful lot around that. AI. So I mentioned that we're changing, the world is changing. I believe the world's changing again. It's accelerating a trend. So this year, because of uncertainty and people are looking at the next belt tightening or whatever, but I think we're all running really lean ships. And so what can you do? Well, there's all these tools that are here now that help you do the hyper personalization, that help you do the bit about, so pick on you, Warren. Warren likes to be communicated to, and actually doing a 3-minute movie explaining exactly how this thing works in a way that they will appreciate, in a language that they will find it easier to understand. So you get rid of that filter thing of differences in language. All of those things are available. And if you don't use them, somebody else will. So you've got that arms race piece coming along. Access to data. So actually, access to data, I can go mine. I can find out who's who in the zoo. I can match my personas. I can dive easily into LinkedIn Sales Nav. I know the organizations I want to talk to. I know the personas I want to talk to. I know that they're first or second connections, and I can drill all of that down really easily, and I can reach those people. So can everybody else. We've still got email. And again, I mean, if you wind and take a look at email in the good old days, I'll do my email campaigns to however many thousand with one consistent message. Well, now you have to expand that audience that you send to. You have to segment it for, here's my economic buyer, here's my technical decision maker, here's my gatekeeper, here's my user, slightly different message for all of those. And then because everybody else is doing it, and there are tools now to weed out all of the junk in the mail, you start having to think about, well, how many email domains do I now have to spool up to get that message out? And then you go look at the maths, and you look at the maths and you say, well, the response rate is really low. The response rate's getting lower. Some might suggest you'd actually be better off printing and sending letters to people, because they'll say, what's this? Right. But the email, the response rates are getting low. So you have to look at, how do I get to those people? And that comes to another point, build your brand. People like to work with people that they like and trust. How do you demonstrate that people can like or trust you? It's all kind of hard work, but there are tools there. The data's there. You can generate a video. Why not generate some videos in sort of like seconds or minutes? And the world's moved on. And I think because of uncertainty that got introduced with what happened in the US, the rate of adoption is much faster than we all had thought. The positive, I think, let's look at the positive of all that. Nothing replaces yet the human touch. I think all of this technology gets you the conversations. You just have to have your head in the game for what's high performance look like now for the conversations that you have.
And are there any last bits of advice that you'd share with sales leaders who find themselves in a phase of stalled growth?
Yeah, I think that's a common thing here, isn't it? You have to go all the way back and look at your ICPs. I think that's where you really have to go. It's all ICP driven, because if you stalled, then that kind of means that you're not finding the incremental piece. I think the advice that I would probably give, go look at your ICPs. The other one that I would give is go look at your installed base. So, I can never remember where the statistic comes from, but it always used to be 7 times easier to go to somebody who's already extracting value out of what it is that you do. And there's another bit, right? But we all forget that average reoccurring revenue is a direct function of annual reoccurring impact. And if you're not making impact when your renewal's out, that's going to be at risk. And that's an issue if you're a stalled salesperson. But if you are making an impact, are you actually looking at how you can expand? Because for years, we've all looked at what's your net new. We looked at your net new, not how can you expand what you've got. And if I was stalled, I think I would be looking at, so what's my ICP? Am I really doing what I'm supposed to be doing and delivering impact? And the other thing I'd be doing is, if I am delivering impact, it ought to be easier for me to go to those customers that I'm already providing impact for and look at what else can I sell? What else can I add?
And just sort of looking at, I guess, your own journey, it's clear you didn't follow a straight line to the top, David, and your journey from sales leader to CEO might maybe once been considered an unconventional path. But as we've talked about, today's business landscape is clearly more common, and it is often considered strategic, and it's obviously a compelling alternative for companies who are seeking that growth-minded, sort of customer-obsessed, even sort of leader mindset. But it does require you as a sales leader to evolve. Less of a deal closer, more of a strategic thinker. So can you share your journey through to CEO? What made it so unconventional? Do you agree with my comments that it is reshaping the profile of modern leadership, if you will?
It is a bit different. And I think I come back to, so why did I? There's opportunities. And I think there's a part of me that always wanted to see what it was like to have that role. And you lead teams and you lead divisions and you lead things. For me, I always saw it as being the next evolution. But I think when we talked about what makes a great salesperson, what gives you hyper performance in there, One of them is about that obsession of details. We talk about high performance. How do you shave the fraction of a second off, the fraction of this, the fraction of that, the fraction off? And if you look at now the whole organization, I think having that obsession becomes really useful, because in my world now it's so development, right? I used to be a product manager. My unconventional journey, I wanted to explore and try lots of different things, so I had a better understanding of all of that. So now product development, product management, I can talk about, so let's put some process in place and let's now measure our speed to get through the gates and how good our code is, because you're talking about rework, and that's the obsession with the detail about shaving the seconds or the milliseconds off each of the laps. Can talk about customer success and now the obsession about giving them extra impact. That becomes a much easier one to understand, because in my past life, that was also directly attributed to how much money I made or my team made by having customers renew, because they got to see continued impact, and it was much easier to do upsell, cross-sell with them. Yeah, a lot of people used to think that wasn't very glamorous, but it is a good way of filling your boots for the organization to make sure that those boring things, like everybody gets paid, the lights stay on, you can pay for marketing, you can pay for all of those things. And I think my unconventional journey's kind of given me a good appreciation for all the other parts of the business that need to be spinning. And I guess, the final bit that's been useful about the unconventional journey piece is the realization about the team. All right. So, I follow my motor racing analogy. You go look at, whether you look at Verstappen or whether you look at Hamilton or whatever, we see the name on the name on the helmet. We see those things, but actually they're really only in that position because they've got a fabulous team behind them. It takes hundreds or thousands of engineers to put that car on the track to enable them to perform. And as we see after every post-race thing, no, it wasn't quite there. And such infinitesimal differences in configuration and setup are what makes such a massive difference. And if you're not obsessive about the detail, then that's really hard, isn't it? Especially today. 3 years ago, you could have got away with it. Today, it's harder, isn't it, really? Even harder because we're all being pushed to live that in a public spotlight.
Yeah, and it's clear that you've shaped the culture of the business, and the energy that comes from you is obviously filtered down into the team as well as the strategy, David. So, absolutely.
Yeah, and just moving on from that, cybersecurity, we all know that credibility isn't optional in the industry. And of course, visibility is an added benefit. It certainly opens doors. So I guess that brings me on to sort of my next question. How do leaders build both? So from your perspective, David, why do you think personal visibility and brand building matters for executives from cybersecurity remit at the moment?
Is confidence. So you go back, right? We all went to some form of sales school or other, and people buy from people they like and trust. And now there's so many people that you need to influence as to you're a good company, safe pair of hands, all of those things. You really do. And so how do you manage to communicate to many? Old days, we would go in, I would wheel out my CEO, brief them on what it was that they needed to say, and go introduce them to the CEO of the new organization that we were trying to sell to, the new organization we're trying to sell to, match the right people up and down that decision tree so they felt comfortable with us. We're a safe pair of hands. It's harder and harder to do that. Everybody's more time pressured. So you look at what's the next best thing, or the thing that helps to qualify you to get to that place, to go get that meeting. I think that's it. Last night, I'm here at RSA, this is when we're recording this. So last night, one of my investors, Evolution Equity, so they're a stunning company. They brought George in from CrowdStrike, right? And we nominated him as CEO of the year. And so interesting. First question was a bit from the audience, was a bit pointy. But you look at the guy, right? CrowdStrike, customer for life, is passionate about that. Thousands of people got impacted by CrowdStrike and the problem that they had. Didn't hide it, went and addressed it. Really sorry. This is what we're doing to fix it. Public faced. And actually, I think he probably increased his trust rating with everybody because didn't try and hide it, addressed it full on, cut and we'll take it on the chin. Why he got nominated, voted for, awarded the CEO of the year. And I think, yeah, he deserves it. And all of that he had the courage to do in the public arena. So good for him. I think that gives us all an ideal sort of role model to go look at. He's probably cringing if he ever sees this, he'll be cringing. But I think that sort of gives us an exemplar of what we all need to try and do.
Here's another great example of high performance as well. Something that's really stuck with me over the years is someone used the analogy of high performance individuals who like the brakes on the car. They've got the ability to slow down and navigate challenges, but then also accelerate at will. And I think that's just a great example of that.
It is. And again, I think, so you talk about high performers. I think it's painful. The slowing down bit is painful. I can't tell you how agonizing it is because we all want to get back to going at warp speed and stuff. That's also part of the life lessons. You're right. Sometimes you have to slow it all down and just say, okay. And people think, oh, okay. I can't tell you how agonizing that is inside, but you have to do it, right? You really do. That's battling all of your natural kind of instincts. I want to get up and run and I want to do no, got to go slow to go fast.
And what else helped you personally cut through the noise and build trust in a crowded market, David?
Oof. At the end of the day, I can only be me. There are things I'll share, there are things I won't share. I can only be me. And at the end of the day, that just has to be it. There are things I'll stand behind. There are things I'll stand up for. It's me. Some people, it might be Marmite. Some people might like me, some people might, but it's me. And I think people will see that if you're artificial, and we talk about credibility and so on, don't we? Authenticity is the word, but it's me. I do the best that I can. I'm a deeply flawed individual. My personality, probably like some of my beloved Formula One guys, I'll tell you all about why I am, but you don't need to know that.
We're all deeply flawed, David. It
makes us interesting, right? I think that's the bit. It makes us all interesting.
And myself and Jay, we meet with a number of boards and technology and security leaders, and a challenge that often comes up and really resonates with our community in particular is, how do organizations protect against increasing sophisticated, hidden and deceptive threats, especially if them becoming even harder to identify, let alone prevent. So I'm curious to gain your perspective in terms of what makes it a good organization, what puts them in a positive position, and how does CounterCraft's approach to deception intelligence stand out in the market at the moment?
So I guess, let's talk about the question. What makes a good customer receptive? Pain. They have to really have pain. Because if you go look at the cyber side, right, nobody's sitting there twiddling their thumbs saying, oh, I wonder what I'm going to do next. They're pretty much firefighting. And so whether you look at the statistics that say there's not enough people in the industry, if you look at the rates and complexities of attacks are changing, the use of AI to make it hyper-personalized, to morph something that worked before that's now detected to make it look different. The stakes are higher than they've ever been. Was it 58% of SMEs that get breached go out of business within a year? So there's a whole ton of complexity and pressure. So there's nobody looking for something else unless they've got pain. That's the first thing. What makes us as CounterCraft different? It's really about trying to make it easy and detect those, well, there's two sides of it. Detect those things that all the millions of dollars worth of endpoint detection won't detect. Why is that? 80% of successful breaches, 16% of all breaches, see maths, are because I've stolen Jay's identity. I'll pick on Jay now. I've stolen his identity. I've done a really creative phishing thing, and the bad actor that's now navigating my network looks like they should be there all day long. And it's really hard. And then all that endpoint stuff says, no, it's Jay. Right, it's Jay. That's fine. Away we go. And that's become so common. And the impact there can be so severe. What we do, I just build things that emulate the things that you would be of interest to a bad actor pretend to be Jay. So where do we keep Warren's personal information? Today, it's like, where do we keep the LLM that powers the AI? It's where have we got the recipe for Coca-Cola or the 11 herbs and spices? Where's the machine that controls the manufacturer of? And where's the box that does my identity and access management? Those things. And for me, I can just replicate those. I don't have to paint your network with loads of endpoints, and that's a pain. We don't have to think about how do we drill holes in those perfectly good firewalls, creating new rules, and don't have to do that. Don't have to look at all the noise on your network, which now gets amplified because there's a new thing that you put on your network, and everything that you've invested in suddenly goes, oh, there's something new. I just build you a replica, right? 90% of my customers, we implement in 30 days or less. And it's easy. And there's when you build a replica of the real thing, well, think about it, it simplifies the problem, doesn't it? There's only two reasons why we put things on the network, breadcrumbs on the network, to make it look super attractive. And we bring that whole environment to life. So it's not like it's one of those honeypots. It's an environment that's come to life. And so when a bad actor comes in, several things happen all at once. I've taken him off your network. He's on mine. He's in my box. Yeah, ka-ching, there's a result. I keep them occupied because they think they're in this rich environment. They see the lights flashing. They see steam puffing out. They see wheels turning. They see people typing into browsers. It's alive. It's a real thing. So they'll stay. I can keep a NATO red team in one of those for 48 hours and they don't know. Within 8 seconds, I can start reporting on who they are and what they're doing and what their plan is. So I can tell you what IP, I will start off with who are they pretending to be? What's the IP that they're coming from? What's the keyboard layout that they're using? That helps you figure out, where do they come from? Are they Chinese? Are they Russian? Are they North Korean? Where are they coming from? All of those things give you attribution. If I know that it's J that they're replicating, well, I can connect that up to somebody like SpyCloud, right? And in that case, what's the 10,000 email addresses that bad actor was using up until 1 hour ago? That makes my life easy to figure out. So if Jay got phished, who else got phished? Did David get phished? Because that will be the next identity. And especially if you're going to start using AI and all the other tools now, that makes remediation super, super quick. But you need to be one of those organizations that has real pain impact when they see that. The other side of what it is that we do, I build deception farms. So I will build something that looks like you, whether it's attached to one of your production lines or whether it just happens to be another financial institution. And the big change I will make is, instead of looking at conventional methods of threat intelligence, which just tells you the world's a bad place, right? Somebody's planning a campaign against a company that uses Microsoft, has an Oracle database, probably uses SAP, might have Cisco. You just described 90% of the financial services community, right? So is it me? That's why you need a data lake. So you look at other factors. If you need a data lake, now you need a cryogenically cooled AI tool and maybe some with a PhD. You might as well just throw chicken bones on the floor and figure out, does it really impact me? Yes or no? What I will do, couple of examples, right? I mean, we did some work with CDA last year, so think tank for UK financials. First of the Fortinet vulnerabilities come out. Should I be concerned? I say it's like Fortinet vulnerability was an extra feature, but we built what looked like a branch office of a building society. We hung licenses on top of that for Fortinet. We put it in a cloud. That's an hour. That takes us about an hour to put all those things together. You let it run for a week, so you've got good logs when somebody goes in, because it's hard to fudge that. Day 2, the bots come along. Day 3, somebody comes along with an IP address from Russia, runs an exploit, rummages around the metaphorical front room, taking documents and bits of information with them, thinking they've done a successful. See how they get in, see how they get out. By the end of that afternoon, I've got a JSON file to give to all of my friends and family to mitigate against that attack. 6 months later, Homeland finds out the Chinese use exactly the same exploit. I found out 6 months earlier using a fake building society in Norwich. Didn't exist. None of it existed. We won an award for beating third largest ransomware gang. We built a whole manufacturing organization in a cloud that didn't exist. None of it. People didn't exist. Manufacturing lines didn't exist. Supply chain, none of it existed. They came along, encrypted the whole thing. We, client, kept the whole facade running for 4 weeks until we got to the point where we had to pay the ransomware, and we got them to open a crypto wallet with 100 euros in. So if we're in the pub, we'd say we profited by 100 euros. But really at that point, game's up. Imagine the information you can extract over 4 weeks of engagement with, and it met the objectives of client because they could flame them and cause that organization to be disbanded. So those are the sort of things that CounterCraft does every single day. And we do that for nation states and large financials and manufacturing companies. And why do we do it? Because they've all got pain. It's not because they think, oh, that's cool. They do that because they've all got pain. We detect what they couldn't detect on the inside, and they know that there are insiders in their network. And then on the outside, they know that conventional threat intelligence doesn't help them. They haven't got the resources to run it. They don't get that immediacy. So again, when you compound and you look at traditional threat intelligence, some of that could be 9 months old. You could have had a baby in that period of time. I'm telling you what happened 10 seconds ago. It's as close as you'll ever get to real time. Somebody who looks like you in your geography with your technology stack. This is what bad people are targeting.
Certainly, I think it adds to the wave of new technologies and solutions we're seeing at the moment. CTEM is something that we've thrown around quite a lot on the podcast, but that continued monitoring, that continued data and positive stuff that can help teams, I think certainly gives it a competitive advantage. But we're also curious. Sorry. After
No, I was going to say AI is the interesting one. So, I mentioned it in there. We work with Google. We're part of their program about securing AI. And that's an interesting one now, because you are seeing bad actors now targeting your personal, like an LLM, your large language model, whatever the AI tool is, that's got your secrets in it, or it's got your calculations and it's got all your data in it. They're targeting that. And you say, well, what can they do? So, great one, actuarial. So we're all of a certain age and we're doing our financial planning, pensions, and all the rest of it. Would it be morbid here? What if I looked at our calculated mortality? We will die at whatever age, and I either increase that or decrease that by a decade. Now, obviously, I'd like it all to live as long as possible. But what if I did that in the actuarial tables, and I cut 20 years off your life, or I added 20 years to your life? Imagine what that might do to all the financial models for a financial organization. And people are doing that. We all watched Mission Impossible, right? And Tom or whoever plugged their handy little box into the facial recognition thing, and we all looked like whoever instantly. You can do that now. That's real. So those things, AI, protecting your AI, because it is your intellectual property, that's a new one that lots of people are looking at as a.
And David, of course, we understand the business has won a number of major awards, especially around your threat intelligence capabilities. Briefly, what does that recognition say about the impacts in your work?
It's really nice to be recognized, isn't it? I think there's two sides to that. The positive, everybody likes the recognition. in the old days, we all used to say, and Gartner recognizes me as being cool, or I'm part of the hype cycle. Gigamon says we're heading towards a magic bit in the middle on the radar and all those things. We won awards. Was it last year? Last year with Fast Company, we won of the Fast 50. My friends at Armis beat me to the best cybersecurity company. We were number 2. I might wind them up I did because I like them. So English, we all have like little wind ups. I think my comment was a little bit like, congratulations. I've only about 700 million invested in me, less than you, and we came second. Yeah, so that was quite cool. It's nice to be recognized with that. The Europa's 100, so top 100 startups in Europe. And that one, I thought, well, that's really cool to be recognized. But actually, if you look at my company, we've been around for years. It's just, I changed it 2 years. I changed it. I've been in here 2 years, and we've just pivoted what and how we do it. And it's cool for that to be recognized. So it's cool. I think it's great for our team because they get to see independent validation. And then the next word, but. So my wife will always tell me everything before the word but doesn't count. Doesn't really impact my bottom line. It's really nice, but it doesn't impact my bottom line. If you're the CISO of a large organization, are you going to look at that and say, high five, here's a reason to go buy it? Old days, people would definitely go look at Gartner and other, but I think it's just a small part of the overall thing about can you build trust, credibility and trust.
Absolutely. So David, we're coming to the back end of the episode now, and we want to talk a little bit more about the social impact of cyber, protecting the next generation, so that Warren and I are very passionate about. We talk about more and more. We know cyber is not just about firewalls and endpoints. It's about people. And most importantly, with I think 30 billion connected devices on the planet, it's also about children. So young people, especially those in the care system, are clearly often left without digital access, guidance, protection. And many of those children over the age of 7 in care may never be adopted and are likely to be overlooked both online and offline. Now, your own personal experiences in adopting 2 boys adds some real depth to the next part of this conversation in terms of digital inclusion, systemic neglect, and I guess the power of stepping up. So let's talk about, we've talked about enterprise risks. What about the risks to vulnerable young people?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it really is. So I've been getting involved with some charitable stuff around mental health and this digital inclusion, and actually frightening statistic, not just children, but you talk about young adults up to age of 25. One of the largest epidemics, mental health, resulting in suicide. That's creating a mental health pandemic that we really don't talk about, and why it could be anything from bullying, it could be problems around self-esteem, it could be all of those things. And it's about the drive of what is perfection, what is it that you should aspire to. My day, what would I aspire to? It's probably one of the cars in my top trumps pack. I'd love to have one of those. That's probably it. Or, I'd love to go play football for England. All I lack is talent. If I had talent and athletic ability, it could be me. But there's tremendous pressures there. My case with my boys can't appear on social media because of where they came from, biological parents, and the tools that are available today to go find you in a Facebook post, a Twitter post, a school something post. So for me, a couple of weeks ago, right, we got half term, my boys are playing at a football camp. One of my boys gets goalie of the week. His little face when he got his brand new goalkeeping gloves given to him. And what does coach do? The coach gets down and starts taking pictures of the kids. And, it's like, how do you choose your moment? You choose your moment when the boys have gone and you go over and say, I'm really sorry, can't use that picture. Not just me, but and there's a court that says you can't. Boom. But that's kind of a UK thing. We haven't got to the stage where we opt in or opt out for our children's sake on things like that. What I've noticed is, my kids are not the only ones. We live in Surrey, and we're at the home of Chelsea Football Club, right? So there are kids there who's got parents they're in the public light, and they don't want their children to appear on social media because then they become a target. And I talked to my friends in Spain. We have very different schemes. Over here you have to almost intervene, whereas in other parts of the world you have to opt in for that. And I think that's the right thing to do. Possibly because we do the old-fashioned parenting, we really restrict what digital access the kids have. They're the age they're at, 8 and 9. Well, yeah, they get access to all the learning stuff that you get, but do they need to be watching YouTube? Do they need to be doing this? Do they need to be doing that? Yeah, no. I think we as parents have the option that we possibly don't do often enough, is about to regulate that. I want my kids to have a good experience, to be able to chat to their mates and talk about, playing football or playing Fortnite or doing all of those things. I just want to control the access of that until they hit whatever we call a responsible age. The digital inclusion piece, well, that's interesting. And again, I guess that speaks to schooling and education and circumstance, doesn't it?
So just following on from that, David, how does the digital divide disproportionately affect children in care?
Well, that's a good question, isn't it? So I think, we talk about my boys, right? They can't appear in any kind of media. They can't access that because it just makes you easy to find, easy to target. And in care, they're previously looked after children, and we have to restrict the access they got. If you were a child in care, then all bets are off. You potentially have full access to it. Really would depend on what kind of foster parent you got or what kind of placement you were put in. There is no control on that. So again, it could be down to financial circumstances and whatever parental pieces you put in place.
And what else do more people need to understand about the UK care system, especially when it comes to children the age of 7 or under, for example?
So this is the bet, if you like, is like my horse and crusade, really. So we chose to adopt boys we didn't choose to adopt boys, we chose to adopt children that were perhaps a little bit older than the norm. And again, let's talk about maths again. When you look at children in need of new homes, new permanent homes, there's a feeling that we certainly saw amongst our friends is everybody looks for the young ones. Everybody looks for young children. And, we were both lucky having families before, didn't feel the need to do that. But what shocked me was as you go along that curve is the older the children in care looking for new forever homes was until you get to the age of 7. It's one of these decreasing curves. It becomes increasingly hard. My boys, when they would hit the age of 8, well, that's it. You go into a care home. It's care home. You go into some form of care. You'd go into a foster parent's home. You'd go into something, and your circumstances wouldn't change. You'd still be in contact with birth parents, all of those things. Your circumstance is not going to change. You're just adding to the impact of their lives through lacks of certainty because you're not in a forever home. You're in a for now home. Hopefully that's a long-term thing, but it might not be. And that becomes very difficult if you're talking about outcomes and transformation of young lives. It's amazing. And you think that a future is written at 8. Otherwise, your future's in your hands. You can change it, but you start to have such a disadvantage. And being blunt, I mean, if you're in that system, it must mean that there was something catastrophically wrong with the family dynamics and circumstances to put you in that place. And for me, I looked at, I absolutely get the idea of you want to get babies, young children and stuff, because you can mold and adapt and do all those things. You don't have to deal with the bit, frankly, I had to deal with, or we had to deal with, we definitely it's team effort, where you have trauma and all this stuff that was background. Yeah, it's hard. Honestly, you talk about all the stuff we talked about today, that this has been the hardest 2 years. CounterCraft has been sometimes a bit of light relief, right? And you go from everything. So imagine we all want hearts and flowers, right? And I deeply love my boys. And the thing that made my week was not walking around. I met Boris Johnson last night. Didn't make my week. See George, didn't make my week. Met all kinds of friends. I met people I've known for 20 odd years through this kind of stuff, but actually physically I've not met them. The thing that made my week, my boys miss me, right? And it's take 2 years and I've got, and they miss you. They really miss you, love you, looking forward to when you're coming home. That made my week. Took 2 years to get to that point. That made my week.
Appreciate your honesty, you sharing, and certainly feel inspired and commend you and your partner for not only opening your homes, your hearts and your lives, and we certainly hope that today's session can inspire others to do that. Now, that being said, those that work in cyber, in tech, how can they get involved? Maybe that might be through adoption, mentorship, social actions. What steps would you encourage people to take?
It's a personal journey. I'm on LinkedIn. Anybody curious, DM me. I'll be happy to have that conversation. Our journey, we went through a charity. I think that's a great way of doing it because you get the coaching. The bit that I do talk to people about is how hard is the journey. And again, I tell you, you've got to look at the question behind the question here. Designed to be hard. It's not that, oh gosh, you've got to fill out financial circumstances and you've got to fill out things about every relationship you've ever had. And you expose all of that stuff, but it's meant to be hard. Why is it meant to be hard? Because we want to push you out, right? It's about those people who will have the grit to see it through because it's not easy. You go through all the bits and pieces and they arrive and you think, oh, yeah, this is great. And then, well, actually, maybe they were happy in that life. It just might be that mum and dad didn't know how to take care of them. They would rather do other things than take care of them. They didn't ask for this. People don't think about, what's their pain? Didn't ask for this. They're taken away from. They've seen things that at their age they should never see. It's impact, isn't it? You deal with that. Why do you do it? It's not altruistic. Can't say this improves my chances of doing this. I'd like to think that I'm a reasonable human being and I want to have an impact in life because when I die, what do I leave behind? Right? Nobody's going to remember me as CEO of CounterCraft. That nobody's going to do that. At my funeral, nobody's going to say CEO of CounterCraft. Hopefully, they'll say decent human being, maybe helped shape the life of two individuals. Maybe. I hope so. That's what I'll leave behind.
I certainly feel that you will. You've been involved in some truly impactful stuff from a personal perspective as well as the work one. So we do commend you in that respect.
Absolutely. Look, just to sort of wrap things up on the episode, David, could you just give us a very brief overview of your purpose, mission, and vision with CounterCraft going forward?
Purpose, mission, so interesting one, isn't it? Purpose. Well, remember when I talked about the Olympics and suddenly the twig that actually this stuff impacts people. It really does. It impacts their livelihood. It does all of those things that businesses shut. I said, something like 60% of all SMEs that experience a cyber attack will close in a year. It impacts livelihoods and people and families and things. So what we do has an impact. And I think what we stand for is to try and do good. That's the mission here. We talk about white hats and black hats, don't we? We clearly wear a white hat. We clearly believe in securing those things that matter, that will protect civilization. Sounds very grandiose, but I think that's it. It's protecting our world. So that's the mission, to do that. The purpose, I'll be really blunt. So the purpose for me is to build an organization that enables us to do that at scale, right? So that we can do that at scale and have an impact for those large organizations, for those nation states, for those large financials, for large manufacturing. And I've got an aspiration. The original purpose of the company was to bring this down, to democratize that. So I'm trying to stand up some managed service. I'm working with a partner. My partner in that case is Accenture. So I've got Accenture building a managed service around us. Hooray. And they're really nice people. I like their mission and purpose and what they go after. But actually the other bit of my purpose, I've got a number of mouths to feed, not just mine, the House of Brown, but everybody who works in my organization has a somebody or a something and a roof over their head and mouths to feed. And my purpose is to make sure that as best I can, we continually grow and support and nurture them. And I have to add, I've got the commercial pressure of investors, and they probably want to see a return on their money as well. So, have to do that. And everything we do is about shaping those two things.
Well, look, David, it's been an absolute pleasure listening to you, and I think there's been some incredible insight across a wide range of topics, and particularly with regards to your own personal achievements. So we'd like to say a huge thank you. I'm sure the community, all our listeners, will have got a lot of value in today's episode. If people want to continue the discussion, for any more sustained engagement, we invite you to join the Secure CyberConnect community, where we offer a range of collaborative solutions for tech and security professionals at no cost. As always, this is expansive community access, mutual mentoring, online networking, and a range of exclusive and compelling interviews such as this one, with many panel discussions and masterclasses coming later in 2025. Huge thank you, David, and goodbye, everybody. If you're struggling with technological, cultural, or talent acquisition challenges, please reach out to the Secure CyberConnect team, where we offer advice and guidance and are here to help.